and welcome to a new episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. I am your host, Katerina. Each week, we dive into a blend of topics that resonate with the soul. Whether you're an architect enthusiast, have a passion for Wanderlust, want to discover holistic approaches to rejuvenate your body and mind, or are intrigued to learn about Vastu Shastra with a modern approach, you've come to the right place. Join me as I sit down with inspiring, like-minded women from various walks of life. We will delve into their journeys to discuss the challenges and moments that define their paths. So sit back, relax, and let the spark of positive energy ignite your curiosity. Hi, it's me, Katerina. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to share with you something that can change the trajectory of your life. If you are ready to start your own architecture firm but are feeling overwhelmed by where to begin, I understand, because I felt the same way when I first embarked on my entrepreneurial journey. This is why I have created the ebook, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. This comprehensive workbook contains everything I wish I had known before starting my own firm. From building a solid business plan to creating your brand, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm offers a step-by-step guide tailored to your timeline, whether you're launching your firm today, next month, or in a few years. Dive into essential topics like financial planning, organization strategies, and how to secure your first client, all in one convenient resource. That's right, you don't have to spend hours researching. I have done that for you so you can focus on building your business. And that's not all. With your purchase, you'll also receive an exclusive meditation for business owners, mindfulness tips, a crystal guide for support, and gratitude exercises to help you stay focused and positive throughout your journey. Turn your dream of having your own firm into a reality with the Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. Click on the link in the show notes to get your copy today. Now, let's dive into the episode. Today, I am joined by Olivia Cleary, founder of the Cleary Collective, a luxury scarf brand. With designs hand-drawn by Olivia herself, these scarves create wearable art that celebrates beautiful architectural elements. Olivia, welcome to From the Honeycomb.
Thanks so much. So happy to be here.
Happy to have you. And as you know, we begin every episode by sharing something that we are grateful for in the present moment. So what are you grateful for?
I have to say, the thing that I am most grateful for right now are my friendships, close friendships that can offer me unbiased advice, sometimes biased, but supportive. And I can't thank my friends enough for where I am today and just like keeping me going.
That's amazing that you have such an amazing friendship group that supports you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel really lucky. And they're all kind of from different parts of life and in different industries. And like, it's great. Friendships are very important to me.
Aw, I love it. I love it. So, Olivia, I know a little bit about you, that you went to architecture school and now you have this beautiful luxury scarf brand, but can you share with the listeners your journey to what's kind of brought you here today?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll just kind of go through my entire creative journey from being a kid. I was always doing creative stuff on the side. When I was younger, it was fairy houses. I was obsessed,
Me too.
Going to the woods.
I did.
Right? It wasn't it so fun? Like you think,
Oh, I love it.
like you get the little acorn hat and you like use it as a bowl. And I think for me, for some reason, I always wanted to make money off of what I did because I think it served as a form of validation for what I created, that it had more use than just like a craft. And so my parents will always tell this story where when I was, it must have been like 5, and they gave me popsicle sticks like as a craft, and I made these coasters. And I had a hot glue gun. I made these coasters. And one day I came home with like $50, which is a lot for a little kid. And they're like, there's just this wad of cash. And my parents were like, where did you get this money? Apparently. And I don't remember the story because I was so young, but they told me that I had gone around to all the neighbors in my neighborhood selling these really basic coasters for like $20 each. And they like some like little blonde curly haired girl comes up to their door. They can't say no. And that is the start of my creative entrepreneurship. So I'd say that's like really where it started. And I was like doing fairy houses. I remember I sold them at craft fairs, and like I'd paint rocks and sell them at craft fairs. It always was like the validation of people paying for it always made me feel like it was like a real thing. When I was in high school, I did a little bit fashion design because, again, it was like a form of art that could be used because it was wearable. And I was actually selected, my piece was selected to walk in Boston Fashion Week's emerging trend show. So, and I was like one of the youngest designers there. It was so cool. So that was like my pre-college journey. Then when I was thinking about college, I have to thank my mom a lot for this because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I was creative. No one knows what they want to do, right? I still don't sometimes. And my mom was like, okay, you're creative. We can't send you to art school because it's a little bit too niche, and we want to make sure that you have an array of skills. So, really great way to translate creativity is through architecture. It's a design process that you can make money with. And so, like, I applied to a bunch of design schools and I ended up getting into UVA architecture school. And that's really where my creative process was honed into something structured, and I thrive in structure. And so, did 4 years there, graduated during COVID, and when I graduated, there were no jobs. And so I started an outdoor dining business. And I went to like the local plant shop and I asked for all their pallets. I took it apart. I did that whole thing and I'd make these beautiful tablescapes. And really, the base of this was how can I create something that I want to use and my friends want to use and is beautiful and well done? So that's where that origin came. I finally got a job in New York at an architecture firm. And I tried to bring the outdoor dining business with me as a little side thing, but hauling that up 6 flights every single time is really tough to scale. And I was at the architecture job for a while, ended up leaving, and then I joined a design firm, more of like interior, so like building out the interiors, still very like you're creating architecture, but just on the inside. And that's actually where I am now. I have a day job. And all while I was having this design job, so I've had this design job for the past 2 years, I've been developing the Cleary Collective. Wow. And so, yeah. And so kind of rewinding back to that, I've always had something on the side because I really think that having an outlet for your own creativity is really important for personal fulfillment. And when I started the concept of Cleary Collective, it was literally how can I make something nice for my friends? And that was art for a while. And I would, create these little pieces that my friends would hang in their house. And then I would create these huge paintings, but they took so long. And then one day my friend was like, you should draw on pants, like a white pair of pants. It's another canvas. Why not? I did. And then another friend asked for a pair of pants and another friend did. And then another friend asked for a dress and it kind of grew there. And I was like, oh, fun. Like I can make these awesome gifts for friends. And then I transferred to scarves when I was trying to think of new canvases that I could draw on and scale. And so that's really the origin story of how I started the Cleary Collective. I'll pause there if you have any other questions, but it literally just started because I wanted to make meaningful gifts for my friends. And then it just blew up from there. So
that's an amazing. I love that. That's one thing about architecture school is it's such a great base for so many possibilities. And I just gave a presentation at a high school and I was telling the students like, even with architecture, you don't have to just build, residential architecture homes. Like there's so much. It creates such a great foundation. And I can see that with you. You are working at a design firm, but even everything I'm sure you've learned in architecture school is helping you with the Cleary Collective as well.
It's so much just a process. Like the creative world is just processes. And like another good example of someone who's taken an architecture degree and done something amazing is Virgil Abloh and doing the whole Off-White brand. He was an architect and yeah, really cool. And it's just, you can do so much more than homes because the concept of architecture is human-centric design. How do you take the lifestyle of a person or a community and translate that into something physical and usable? And that the concept of this can be applied to so much. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you there.
No, absolutely. And so, yeah, share with us more about the Clearly Collective because it's beautiful pieces and how you come up with the design. I've seen some of your reels and it's an incredible process. I love to see how the scarf comes from like design to the final product.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a structure, there's an equation that I have that I somewhat stumbled upon And I've just been iterating on. And the structure is literally just, how do you take meaningful elements and architecture and symbols and translate that into a beautiful design that then is meaningful to someone else. And we started out with scarves, but we really we're trying to become a one-stop shop for anything really luxury and meaningful. So that could be anything from scarves to cashmere to blankets to a car wrap, or we're looking into coffee table books and fun stuff like that. But so when we started, it literally was because I was looking for something meaningful to give to my friends, and I created the UVA scarf. And I was inspired by the architecture of the campus. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about, okay, I can give this to my friends because they all know UVA very well, but I can also give this to my mom's friends, my like older friends, as gifts because they've walked the same halls as we have. You know, architecture is so timeless. And so it's really able to transcend all these generations. And so it just kind of made sense. You just take the places on a school campus that mean the most, and you tessellate them, you make them symmetrical, you weave them together into this beautiful design that tells a story of something meaningful. And that's really like the structure that I've worked with. So that's how I'll do college campuses, is I'll find someone that goes to the college and I'll say, okay, talk to me about your day. Where are the places that you're going, that you're hanging out? What's meaningful when you graduate? You know, sometimes there's like a seal that you walk on, like these gates you walk through, and it's really about learning these different narratives and reflecting them. So that's the school structure. And then once I realized we could do it for schools, I thought, you know, why don't we do it for locations? And I did the West Village in New York, which is where I live. And I just thought about like what I like to do. I love to get drinks at this place. I love walking on the West Side Highway. This is my favorite coffee shop. This is my favorite place to eat dinner. And I put that all onto a scarf as well. And then people can relate to that because they see their favorite restaurant on here. They see their favorite park, stuff like that. And so again, it's the structure of taking meaningful elements and putting them into a beautiful design. Lastly is like, how do we do that with corporations and really kind of more rigid branding that needs to be made more creative? For example, let's take Bloomberg, for example. I think this is a good example because they appreciate good design. If you've seen any of their offices, they invest so much into the architecture and it's stunning, similar to like Google, these like campuses. But Bloomberg, it's a computer terminal company. That's what they do. And it's corporate. That's just what it is. So my concept when it comes to putting meaning into this, how can we take the experience of Bloomberg, everything that they have to offer, and translate that into a beautiful design that isn't focused on the logo, because the logo means something only because of the experience that's associated with it, and translate that into something beautiful. And so it's kind of a higher level version of the way that I've been translating college campuses into something meaningful, using elements that go beyond architecture and could even be the terminals themselves or other aspects of the company culture that people appreciate. So that's really how my design process works. Is there's always a person on the ground that I'll talk to really get that experience down, and then I'll translate that through a series of elements and then turn it into something beautiful. So yes, that's the process there.
Oh, I love hearing about the process. And I was scrolling through your website before our call and just seeing the designs, and you can see there it's a story. You've created the memory, the story, and it just makes it such a unique piece because yes, you could buy a scarf that just would say like Bloomberg or something. And that's great, and like you said it, but to give it meaning and to share that story with the design that you create, it's just makes it so much more personal, so much more unique and special. And also it's almost like a capsule of whatever the architecture, the layout is, that memory. It can be part of a capsule collection, and I think it just makes it so much more special.
Yeah, that's the idea. And especially when you're spending your 9 to 6, a good chunk of your life at this place, it's something you should be proud about and something that you want to take home with you, but not like you don't want to take work home with you. You want to take this amazing community, this amazing experience that you've had, and translate that into something beautiful. And it's been really fun to learn about all these different companies and the way that they work and how we can translate all of those brands into very cool things.
And how has the Clearly Collective influenced your design as far as your design work? Like, have you learned new things designing the scarves that has now translated into your design work?
Design, what do you mean by design work?
Like at your 9 to 5 job.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't see a lot of crossover. I see the crossover I see is from the taste of the firm that I work for is very luxurious, and the everything from the color schemes to the detail work is very intentional. For example, it comes from a tall family. They'll raise the countertops,
Right.
a few inches to really make it human centric to them. And it's like those details and that extra layer of thinking that I translate that into the way that I think about things. And also just my day job does so much beautiful work, and that's inspiring as well. And seeing like how can we like also fit into this industry. And for example, like I'm working with this designer in Aspen, and we're making like an Aspen print, and she wants to put it on headboards. We're like, this is going to be the best thing ever. And she was just talking me through the process, and for me, I knew exactly what she was saying because I work in interiors, and I know that there's like a place for this, and I know exactly how it needs to be fabricated. I understand that design process. So I'd say my day job actually informs like product market fit for the products I create in Clearly Collective a lot more, and also just aesthetic and everything like that.
Interesting. Interesting. That's what I was wondering, like which one influences which one. And so it sounds like your day job influences the Clearly Collective. And then even I'm sure a little bit back and forth, but that's incredible. Can you share with us a little bit too about the design work that you work on for your day job?
During the day?
Yeah, during the day.
Yeah, sure. So we do mostly residential, but we'll do some commercial residential where we'll work on an entire apartment unit and it'll be like resold to people. So, for example, one of the main projects I work on is a 15 unit complex in the Upper West Side in this beautiful historical building. And each apartment is a little bit of a different floor plan, but there are general design guidelines that we have and apply to each. So we'll have the same countertops, the same type of millwork, the same walls, same stonework, but it just has to be altered based off of the conditions of each site. And there'll be large apartments, there'll be small apartments, and we have to tier them all. It's an equation. And so that's my main project. I'm working on some residential projects, which are also really fun because that's like very specific to a person. And so you really get to learn and talk to the client about what their preferences are. Like, for example, our client has a dog, and we're making this whole area for the dog, and it's so sweet. And yeah, it's really interesting. So
No, I work in residential and high-end residential. So I used to live in Chicago. That's where I went to school. And I remember working in the apartments and the luxury apartments. And the one thing I love about residential architecture is it's so intimate because you are creating something for a client and it's their home. And I know there was one client, we built a specific pet gate for him, and it's just like it was an intricate, beautiful, it ended up being like a $40,000 pet gate, right? But it fit the architecture of the space and it was for his cats. And so it's fun because it's such an intimate connection. And you're creating the space that someone is really going to enjoy and use and raise their family in and grow up in. And it reminds me, there's a client I have now because I work for myself and I live in California now. There's a client, and in their house they have a cat room as well, and we're making this special with all these climbing things, and it's just so fun. It makes it so unique because then every project is so different because you're fitting it with the individual themselves, and it's just always, and I feel like you learn something new with every client.
right. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I really like the way that you spoke to the intimacy of the design. And there's just something so important about that. And that's what makes it design impactful, is that like intimate relationship between the designer and the client, and then how that's expressed.
Mhm. No, absolutely. And it's just such a difference from like the commercial world. Like I've had a little bit of experience with commercial projects here and there, but that's why when the internships I had during college and during university days, I had, residential internships. And that's when I noticed, I'm like, oh, this is just so much more like, yeah, keep using the word intimate, but it's you're creating a
It
home for
is.
someone. And regardless of, I've talked about this on another podcast with someone, like giving back to the architectural community. And sometimes it is fun working for that 1% because they're just so creative and you just never know what they're looking for. And There is something in the high-end residential, the luxury brands, where it just elevates the design as well. And that just makes it so much more fun.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I completely agree.
Random question, because I've been following you on Instagram, is I know you're from Boston originally, right?
Yes.
Did you live in the city of Boston or more like the suburbs?
The suburbs. I grew up in Concord,
Okay.
Massachusetts. So it's like, in history, the Battle of
Oh,
Lexington and
yeah, yeah,
Concord.
yeah. Okay. That's where.
That's me. There's always people in colonial garb
Oh,
all the
gotcha.
time.
That's so funny. I actually lived in New Hampshire for a few years in Durham. And my
Oh,
sister,
really?
yeah,
Oh,
and
cool.
my sister goes to Boston University. She's actually graduating this spring from her master's program. But why I wanted to talk about Boston is because you live near such a beautiful historic city, and there's not many historical cities in the US, did living near Boston at all influence any of your like architecture career? And I mean, now you live in New York, which is an abundantly architectural city, but did growing up in Boston at all influence your architecture?
That's a great question. I think in retrospect, I think there is some influence. I think that there's an intentionality behind the architecture of Boston in some places, that is. And I think some newer cities where there's that period of time when people were just putting up buildings to put up buildings and make space, and it wasn't about the beautiful stonework and the beautiful entryways and all of the detail work. It was more just like a how do we get this done the cheapest and the
Oh, yeah.
fastest? I think Boston's very much like blessed with intentional architecture from Trinity Church, that massive church in the center of Boston. And I mean, even, the Harvard campus area, these beautiful brick buildings and ironwork, and the whole Cambridge area is amazing. I think being able to see these historic homes that represented that age of intentionality in architecture has been amazing. So I am very grateful for that, definitely.
Absolutely. And I just was thinking as you were saying about the unintentional, I think the further you move west, and like I'm thinking about, I live in suburbia of Orange County. It's cookie cutter homes. Like there is no intention. I mean, the intention is get as many people in, it's a developer mindset. And so it's beautiful to think even in Boston. And so that's why I was wondering if that all impacted you. Because for me, traveling a lot, I was born in the Czech Republic and we lived in New Hampshire, Colorado, and all over the US. And that really just being around all of that architecture is what also influenced me into becoming an architect. So that's why I was curious, because I like that you brought up the intention of designing architecture. And I think that's something that's sometimes being lost with design work now. And it's all about exactly get it done the fastest, cheapest way. And there is something about like the ornate architecture and the detailing. And that's where I think it goes back to the high end and the luxury brands. We have that time to look at those details more than I think like the cookie cutter homes.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And it's too bad because that was the standard for so long. In Concord, I was surrounded by all of these old homes. Like the Little Woman
Oh, yeah.
home where those girls
Mm-hmm.
grew up, for example, that's like down the street from my house. And even that house, they weren't very wealthy. They weren't whoever Timothy Chalamet's character plays, But even their home is just so beautiful, It's has the woodwork, it has the beautiful mantle, it has everything. And it's just interesting how architecture has transitioned this way, and that isn't as intentional. It reminds me of this conversation I was having with my coworker just yesterday. We were on a site visit and she was telling me how in Venezuela, where she's from, the partitions are made from brick. So the walls, like within the
Wow.
house, are made from brick as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
drywall and studs. And so what the way that they do it is, and at least 10 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, she said, they build the brick walls like to separate each room, which was like amazing for sound and everything like that. And it was very sturdy. And then the plumbers would come in and they would like chip away to put the plumbing through the walls. And it was such a time consuming process. But she said like labor was cheap
Mm-hmm.
there. So it worked, which, might have to do with something here. Like everything is more expensive, and time is money, I feel like, is a mindset here. And so they don't really want to put the time into that. But, there are some places today that still put that intentionality into the architecture and that aren't just the 1%. And it's like interesting to see culture to culture where intentionality into space really exists. I feel like the Danes do it really well, like Danish architecture, amazing. I studied abroad in Copenhagen, and that was getting the exposure to everything there was great. And even just these like cottages in the middle of nowhere. I follow these Instagram accounts that are like Norway cottages under 50K. And I'm like dreaming about, some far remote cottage, but they're all so well done. I think there's something like with like the US system of architecture. And also this is my New England mindset, so you can tell me about your coast. But I think we're trending in the direction of being more intentional with our architecture, especially with public projects like in New York, for example, Little Island, the High Line, which is awesome. And I'm so happy that that's happening. But there was a bad period where we're just like, let's get it up. It's cheap. Just get people in there. And so yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Now you have me thinking about my area. And like I said, because I live in like suburbia, it's just so different where it is about getting everything done quickly. But I work also along the coast, like Laguna Beach, Dana Point, Newport area. And that's where I see there is a lot of intention, especially like with historical buildings. I know, okay, the historical buildings, they were built in like the 50s, okay, 30s, 40s, which is very, I mean, not compared to Boston and then of course Europe, but there is some intention to keeping like the historical heritage of when people first came to like Laguna Beach and really focusing on like the historical aspect. I've noticed that a lot of saving a lot of these historical homes, and they've moved them around the city. Like if something needs to be moved, like I've seen buildings be moved to another site. It's all over Laguna. So to keep the integrity and the history, I think that's one of the big things as well. And to kind of tie that back into the Clearly Collective, I feel like we're talking about like architecture and like timelessness and having this product that is also well designed and well fabricated, which I have a question. How did you learn how to fabricate the scarves and like how to create them from like a business aspect? It's just a business question. Like where to source the silk, who prints it. That part always fascinates me because like I would love to also create something, but
Yeah.
how do you find those resources?
Yeah. That's a great question. And that was such a daunting part of my process for so long. And I actually started out on Etsy because you can find these like printing services on Etsy. And that was my first round of product was made out of like a really cheap polyester. And those are some of my first scarves. And I found a print and ship service there and they did it all for me. So I would just send them a Photoshop file and then all these scarves would show up. And it was great. Also, my first round, like I thought it would save money if I were to sew the edges myself. It's really hard to sew fabric that's really polyester like, and there's like runs everywhere. But that being said, I sold them for like $25 each, so they got what their monies were worth. But so that was my introduction to it, which is you need to find an online platform that has print and ship services. There are so many out there. And now when I talk with a client, sometimes they have specific requirements on what they're looking for. So like, should it be a US based manufacturer? What type of sustainability practices do they want? Obviously we have workplace requirements, making sure it's like a safe working environment. We want to make sure that the material is safe. And so as you get into this, and there's tons of resources online, like there should be a checklist that you have of every single factory that you work with. Also, there's things to think about like tariffs and fees from different countries. Like luckily I'm at the point where like I have a partnership with a home brand. And if I say, okay, I want like linen from India and it needs to be high quality and I need to make sure that it passes these certifications, they can connect me with that group. And so it took a while to build to that, but that's where I am now. But I'm trying to think of like platforms that you could use. India Mart is one. It just takes a lot of time sorting through. Alibaba's one. You just got to sort through. And then those are like kind of on the low end of platforms. Other platforms you can use that are targeted towards like it's just a little bit more expensive because they've already filtered through Alibaba and India Mart and all these places. I was just on one the other day, I forget, but they exist. And so you basically find like a third party that will do the work for you. And then it works like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I always thought about that. I'm like, how do you connect with everybody? Like that's because, yeah, like you said, it's daunting at first because it's like, how do
It
you know?
is.
And then I was reading on your website, so you also have a business minor, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
entrepreneurship.
How has that helped you? Because so I never took a business class. Now I run my own architecture firm for a year now. So this has been like full life lesson learning the business side. How has your business minor helped you with your companies, even from the beginning when you graduated?
So it's interesting. When I graduated, I went right into architecture, and it didn't, like, there was no business associated with that. It was just, learn the technical skills, learn how to do a set, and just do that over and over. I'd say now the way that it's helped me is a lot to do with marketing, for sure, sales, which is just part of it, and then structure. You have to start an LLC or like an S corp or a C corp or whatever. I was familiar enough with the terms that I knew LLC was the way to go, at least for me. And I think the other thing that entrepreneurship, the program, opened me up to is just what the possibilities are out there as long as you can communicate your idea well. And so we'd have these like classes where you would pitch and you would come up with these ideas and you come up with a whole business plan. And it really was about, you can have any idea out there, but you just have to make it digestible to the everyday person for them to catch on and actually start investing or like buying your product. That customer journey was clarified in school in a way that now I use every day. And so, we'll have exploratory calls and we'll have these like great conversations, and it like helps me guide that on like the sales and business side. And then in terms of, I'm trying to think of like other things I learned. There's also just a lot of resources out there in terms of supporting entrepreneurs, and it opened me up to that. And there's different think tanks and like labs and starters and accelerators that it kind of just opened me up to the idea that that's out there. And there's a lot of support for entrepreneurs, especially female entrepreneurs. Everyone's always supporting us, and I think it was exposure that helped me the most. The business side is really interesting and relevant, but we didn't dive as much into like the ecom economics or whatnot. It was more like conceptual. Let's get an idea off the ground. Let's get people to understand it, and like, let's make money with it. How can you position yourself in the best way? Product market fit, all of that fun stuff. So yeah, it's been really helpful in that sense.
You're making me want to go back and get, I wish I had gotten a business minor because I think it would have been so helpful. Even like when you said you're coming out of school and you go to an architecture firm or a design firm, and yeah, it's learn how to build a set, do a set, and that's it. But it's great to hear that you've been able to use it in your business, and it helps you think differently as well. And then if you're ever thinking about starting your own architecture firm, if you're thinking about starting your own architecture firm, I think that even can help, or like you said with because it is even with products. So I'm about to launch my ebook. By the time this episode airs, it'll be launched, but that's something I'm learning about marketing and like how to get a product out there. And it's so interesting, like the thought behind it and how to work with consumers. And it's just so fascinating. So it's great that you were able to get some sort of like background and knowledge on it before. And I'm sure that's really helped you succeed because your brand looks, I mean, like I said, I was scrolling on your website and I love the designs, and I'm like, I've been looking, I'm like, what should I get? Because we'll talk after. I have a few questions
Okay.
after, but it's just, yeah, like I said, I think your brand, it's so beautiful, and it just, like the Cleary Collective brand is just so beautiful and it's timeless. I think going back to like the architecture, we were having the conversation about just like with like designing with integrity, and like that's what your pieces are. They're not just this like fast fashion, just these designs. They are meaningful, they have the memories, and then the architectural elements to it. Like you've really created a beautiful product.
Wow. Thank you. My heart is like feeling it right now. Thank you. The one thing I'd say is that like having the business minor was amazing in terms of exposure. And you might have found this from school in the sense that like when you go to design school or architecture school, it's not exactly the same in real life. It's very much you learn kind of on the job. And I think the entrepreneurship minor exposed me to it. So I knew it was there. But I really think that you can go very far if you're intentional about what you want to learn. And the thing is that I knew what I needed to learn because of the exposure. So I knew like what search terms to literally look up on YouTube, like how to make a product market fit diagram, stuff like that. And that's what that was helpful for. But like, if you really want to learn, it's always testing, it's always iterating until it works. And for example, like my brand, I remember when I first started out, it was not working for a while. And it just took a few times to iterate and find something that resonated with people for it to actually get off the ground. And then once you find something that works, just keep doing that for a while.
Absolutely. And that's the thing with entrepreneurship too. And it's trial and error, and you just learn, and you learn from every trial. You learn, you take the lessons and you apply it to the next one. And that's how you learn. Yeah, for sure. It's taking theory and using it in practice. Well, Olivia, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm so glad we connected. I loved our conversation from architecture to entrepreneurship, talking about your company, all around. This was such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so fun to just talk about design and everything. And I really appreciated all your conversation and questions.
Oh, thank you. And where can listeners find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on my Instagram at the Cleary Collective. That's where we have really everything from brand deals to, the stuff that we actually sell. And then go check out my website at theclearycollective.com.
Perfect. I'll provide links in the show notes. Olivia, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. As we conclude, I want to express my gratitude for joining me in today's episode. I hope you have found it insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and click that like button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share this with your friends. You can follow me on Instagram at From the Honeycomb podcast, and you can also further your support of From the Honeycomb by visiting the Patreon link provided in the show notes. Your contribution helps make more episodes possible. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, A Spark of Positive Energy, that comes out on the 7th of each month. Thank you so much, and see you next Friday.